remember, the word dependent means that it needs light, while the word independent means it does not need light. And if we also recur, there's this thing called the thylakoids, which are where these light-dependent reactions occur, and there's the stroma where the independent reactions occur. All right. The other thing, right, the color we consider an object to be is the light that it reflects. It absorbs all of the other colors. And one pigment, one color that we specifically talked about, it's this chlorophyll, right? And chlorophyll is this green, right? It gives plants their green color, and it allows them to capture energy from sunlight and transform it into food. So chlorophyll is the key to plants being able to make their own food and not needing to eat other organisms. We also went over the difference between a chloroplast structure and how going this way we're getting smaller. So we started a plant cell, we go to a chloroplast is made up of these things called granum, and granum are made up of thylakoids. That's all stuff that you guys should know from our past 2 weeks going over photosynthesis. Today we're going to move on with what factors allow photosynthesis to occur at a faster or slower rate. What I want you to know is that there are 3 main factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. And I want us to remember that the word rate basically means speed. How fast is photosynthesis occurring? Another thing is, remember, the faster the rate, the more increased the rate is, the more food that the plant is able to produce, and the taller the plant can grow. And this here is all because a faster rate equals more energy stored. We have those ATP bonds which are storing energy, which are then used to make our sugar. So the more ATP we store, the more sugar that can be made, and the more food that this plant has to grow. So here are the 3 factors that we're going to be focusing on. Our first factor is going to be the temperature of the plant's environment. How hot or cold is the environment the plant is in? The amount of water available to the plant, and then lastly, the intensity of the light. Okay, so these are our 3 factors. All right, and we're going to go deeper into these right now. So first with temperature, I want you guys to understand that there are many enzymes involved in photosynthesis. And if you remember what enzymes are, they are proteins involved in chemical reactions. Okay, proteins involved in chemical reactions. And so these are very important in photosynthesis, where there's tons and tons of these chemical reactions occurring. And if you also remember, we did a whole unit on the factors that affect these enzymes, and one of these factors was temperature. And if you remember, all enzymes have an optimal you can also think of this as an ideal temperature that they work at. So if we look at this graph we have here, you guys can see that we have the rate of photosynthesis on the left, and it's increasing as it goes up. and we have temperature here on the bottom, and temperature is increasing as we move to the right. And if you notice, somewhere right here in the middle, we have what we consider the ideal temp of photosynthesis. It's right here that the most food will be produced. Okay? And this temperature that we call the optimum, right, the optimal temperature of photosynthesis, it's anywhere between 32 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Anywhere in this range. Okay, so you guys can imagine that about right here is where 32 degrees would fall, and about right here is where 95 degrees would fall. Okay, outside of these two numbers, so going this way, okay, or going this way, we actually have photosynthesis occurring at a lesser rate. Okay, and what happens when photosynthesis occurs at a much slower rate is that less food is produced and less growing occurs. So that's twofold. Here and here, this is where the photosynthesis is going to be slower because it's outside of that optimal range, and we're going to have less food being made and less growth occurring. Okay, so we have our optimal range of temperature, and this is where photosynthesis is going to occur the best, between 32 degrees and 95 degrees. All right, now what about water? We said water is very important. And this is because, if you can remember, water is actually one of the inputs to photosynthesis. If we go way back up to the top, you can remember that right here in this light-dependent reaction, we have water right there. Okay, so water is an input into photosynthesis, and without it, we're not actually able to make the ATP we need. So, if we have a lack of water lowers the rate of photosynthesis and can cause tissue damage in the plant. Less food is produced when there is less water. Okay, so once again, now I want you guys just to use common sense. Think about it. If you don't water any of those plants that you might have in your yard or your house, they're never going to grow, correct? But there's also the alternative where if you water them too much, they're also going to die. Okay, so it's this balance once again where you don't want too much water, but you also don't want too little. Something that's actually really cool is the fact that many plants in dry climates have evolved special waxy leaves. These waxy leaves reduce the amount a plant sweats. Okay, and in turn, this keeps more water in them. So these waxy leaves can be very important, especially in desert areas or areas where there's lots and lots of sunlight and maybe not so much water. And if you go into your yard, I guarantee there are some plants there that just have waxy leaves. Water, lastly, is also what helps a plant stand upright. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, I want you to take a look at this photo below And you can see that the plant that I have here on the left, it's standing upright. You see how all these leaves are facing the sun. This allows it to optimize photosynthesis. Okay? This plant has a lot of water. Now the plant on the right, you can see that all of its leaves are pointed down. Here we have increased photosynthesis. Here we have decreased photosynthesis. And this is just because when the leaves face upward, they're able to get more sunlight, whereas when they face downward like this, when there's not water, they get a decreased amount of sunlight. So water is very important in that factor. Lastly, light intensity. Real quickly, I want you guys just to recall the fact that it's light that actually provides the plant with the energy it needs, right? And chlorophyll stores the energy from the sunlight, and it takes this energy and it uses this to make food. So without the sunlight, we're not actually able to have any energy to even be stored. And so, right, if we have low light intensity, oops, and I want you guys to think of this at night when there's no sun, the rate of photosynthesis is very low. No energy to store it, right? Whereas at high light intensity, think of a sunny day sometime during the midday when the sun is very bright, the rate of photosynthesis is very high. Lots of light, and therefore energy absorbed. Okay, lots of light and energy absorbed when there is a high intensity of sunlight. This is why a plant cannot survive in the dark, because it needs sunlight. Now, if you have a UV light, like some of you might have in your house, to give plants the light that it needs, that's fine. It's getting plenty of energy from that UV light. But aside from that, plants aren't really able to survive in the dark. Think about it. If you put a plant in a cupboard, would it be able to grow? It wouldn't. And if we look at this graph that we have here on the right, you guys can see that the light intensity, okay, and the rate of photosynthesis that we have here, you'll see that as the light intensity increases to the right, the light intensity increases this way, you see that the rate of photosynthesis is increasing this way. Okay, so the more light intensity we have, the greater the rate of photosynthesis. All right, that pretty much sums it up. So this is just a real quick recap. When you guys are doing your group work, you'll see that this is a pretty good area to go reference once more. And just remember that photosynthesis has a faster rate when all of these conditions are met. When the temperature is between 32 degrees and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, when water is readily available, when light intensity is high. This is when we'll see that we have lots of growth, right? The plant will be increasing in growth, and its leaves will be facing up towards the sun. Photosynthesis has a slower rate when the temperature is